that. Thank you very much. Perfect. Right, let me share my screen and do all of that. So, welcome to the Participatory Grantmaking community. We're a global collective of individuals and organisations from all sorts of places and backgrounds and different organisations and roles. And we're interested in sharing knowledge and practice to improve participatory grantmaking and hopefully change philanthropy for the better. You can access all of our stuff for free. We provide it as open as possible to ensure that we are changing philanthropy as much as possible. So we've got our website with links to our resources and up and coming events. You can join our community through our Google groups, our email and our Slack channel. And we also host learning sessions. This is one of them. So you can join monthly via Zoom, or if you miss something and you want to catch up, everything is on our YouTube channel. Or if the time zone doesn't work for you, because we work globally, we mix and match when we have timings for things to do that. So how it started, we started with 12 people on a Zoom call in March 2000, trying to chat about participatory grantmaking and things that were of interest to us. It's grown significantly since then. Actually, this week we have hit 1,000 people involved, which is, I mean, quite the achievement. I'm very proud. It's very exciting. We started off hosting 2 sessions monthly on different time zones, but with the same agenda. We continue to hold those monthly peer support and learning sessions. They are the first Tuesday of every, actually, I'll show you, I've got a slide with when they actually are, so I'll give you that when we get to it. And then we do the peer support and deeper dives, so looking at a particular area or issue that we want to focus on, recording those and putting them on our YouTube channel. The community or the world has slightly opened up a little bit, so we are starting to branch out and meet people in face-to-face. So we had our first London meetup and our first New York meetup. We've got some others in the diary, so I believe that we've got sessions coming up that haven't quite been announced yet in the Bay Area, in kind of San Francisco way. And we have a session on the 8th of December in Brussels. So that should be exciting if anybody is kind of, I don't know, that way and interested in getting involved in meeting some people in real life. The sessions so far have been delightful. We tend to have no agenda. They're fun and engaging and ways to create friendship, relationships, connections, learning and insights with others in a similar place. Our open houses, which are kind of peer support sessions, happen on the first Tuesday of every month. So the next one is on the 1st of November. For the UK timing, my time maths is dreadful, but for the UK, it's 8 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. So that tends to be the time zone that catches Europe, Australia, that kind of area of the world, whereas November the 3rd is UK time 5 p.m. till 6:30 p.m, which tends to catch the Americas. So if you're interested in any of those, you can find the information on our website, and I'm sure that the wonderful Elena is posting all of the links at exactly the right time in the chat, because she's great and that's what she does. You can follow us on social media, on Twitter, LinkedIn. Twitter's at PGM community. No, it's not. It's PGM.com, so COMM. And the LinkedIn, if you search Participatory Grantmaking Community of Practice, we come up. We often tweet under the Participatory Grantmaking hashtag. If you capitalize the first letters of a hashtag, it makes it much easier for screen readers. So yeah, you can find our stuff through there. We've also got an email address. If you have any queries or want to get in touch, you can email info@participatorygrantmaking.org. So this community is predominantly volunteer run, so Elena helps out with some of the coordination, but the rest of us are doing this in our spare time on top of the day jobs. We offer quite a lot for that volunteer time, so we provide 2 monthly meetings, our Slack, our Google groups, website, learning events, networking resources. We can promote your work, opportunities, connection, community, making friends. It's a great offer. it's really, really nice to be involved with. But we often ask that if you are involved in the community, which we all hope you will be because you're here at our events and getting involved with the things that we're putting on, that you can get more involved if you would like to blog about your work, share stuff that you're learning, speak at any of our events. If you want to host an event in your local area, if you want to write or blog or share or volunteer for us, there's always opportunity to do that. We are volunteer run. We have some funding. We're really transparent with that. So all of our accounts are open online. You can see exactly how much money we've got coming in from where and where it's going out to. We pay all of our speakers for their time and their wisdom, and our accountability circle. So if you would like to donate anything to the running of the community, feel free. That is my little spiel for now. We have some amazing speakers with us today. We're going to kick off with Peter, who's going to, so future stuff, people are talking about it all over in philanthropy. It's coming up quite a lot: imagination, futures, foresight, emergent practices. It can be slightly overwhelming and a bit confusing. And I think there's an opportunity to learn a bit more about what that could be, how that matches in with participatory grant making, what that could look like. So my team were doing quite a lot of work in this space, and I was slightly confused, didn't really understand it, and went on a bit of a hunt for, what is this? How do I find out more? What does this look like? And I found this amazing organisation called Teach the Future. There are two organisations called Teach the Future. One is about the climate, which looks very good when I found their website, but is not the same thing as Teach the Future, which teaches predominantly children and young people about future practice. Peter is from Teach the Future and is going to give us a bit of an intro as to what this is all about. So Peter, I'm going to hand over to you.
That's terrific, Anna. Thank you very much. To describe, imagine you had to describe the field of history or the field of science in 15 minutes. So this is quite a challenge to do that. So I've taken a little bit focus on this particular event, and let me share my screen so I can tell you what that was. Hannah was excellent about giving us a, you see the screen there, Hannah? The title slide?
Yeah, all good.
Great. Okay. Hannah pulled us together about a month ago and found out about participatory grant making, and with a great deal of admiration on my side, noticed that this was really a group that was out to create change. A lot of foresight and a lot of futures is about describing change, describing what's happening in the world. But I decided to focus a little bit on a very common topic, which is innovation, the ability to change. Now, we have probably in our work on Teach the Future to bring young futures thinking to young people, probably maybe 50 people. So the fact that you have 1,000 people, Hannah, that's a great congratulations, and you've obviously got a lot of power and a lot of reason for doing so. So I've taken the time to think about what part of future studies would be most appropriate for you folks as you get into that. And there's two major parts that points that I'd like to make. And one of them is about systems thinking, which we create, which we have a required course where I was at the University of Houston on systems thinking. It is really a perspective, and I'll point out where that fits in to what you're doing. And then secondly is just fundamentally about change. We don't really learn about change very much in school, either in K-12 or university. So a little bit about change and how change works. And all of this, I think, is ammunition, not ammunition, that's the wrong word, is raw material for talking points for your mission, which is to bring participatory grant making and indeed probably other changes to the grant making community. I mean, you're change makers. So my contribution here is, how do you use a few insights from the futures field to further your efforts as you engage others outside this 1,000 person group and do that. So two things: systems thinking and so systems thinking. Russell Ackoff, a major theorist in this area, system is basically anything that has parts and anything where those parts are interrelated. There's really two levels that I want to address this topic. First of all, grant making itself as a system, the organizations, the funders, all of the regulations, that's a system, but also then the targets. Is it health, the SDGs, climate change? All of those are systems as well. And we really emphasize not exclusively, but that there should be some attempt to both change the system of grant making, not just some of the practices, but how it works, and indeed for the grants to change the systems that are their targets. It's an understanding of all the parts. This is my favorite cartoon about systems thinking. You've been there before, I think. Whether you're in the front of the boat or the back, we realize that we're all in this together, and that segmenting and saying, well, that's not my problem, is generally a strategy for not being very effective and not having your change take place. So systems thinking is absolutely essential for doing both the grant making. I love this idea of a beehive. Beehive, of course, is a system made up of bees. The bees themselves create the system, but as Kevin Kelly from Wired Magazine pointed out, there's nothing in the bee where you won't find the hive. And by the same token, music is made of notes, and somebody says, oh, it's just notes. Well, it is notes, but it's something else, and it's more than notes. So the system is more than the sum of its parts. This is a great little video. I don't know if it's going to play here. Let's see. There's something we call system behavior. It just goes on, and each bee is participating, but it is a system property. It is not a property of the individual bees. So to bring it all to a close, systems thinking is the beehive. It's a system, is interacting parts. It has observable manifestations, which we call behaviors. And the structure of the system is the relationship of the parts. The behaviors are observable. We know about what the system does. It's the relationships that are kind of fuzzy, and we have to interpret them. We have to infer them. And frankly, in the kind of society that we're in, people don't like to infer things that they can't touch, they can't see. So we're pushing a perspective that is a little bit vague and a little bit fuzzy, particularly from a Western point of view, because it's not empirical, it's not concrete, it's not actually what it is. So the system itself is made up of parts in an environment. Those parts have relationships. And the generalization is that we push is that a system's behavior, what we see it do, is a function of its structure. That's not 100% true. There are also systems where the part itself produces the behavior. If your brakes give out on the car, well, it's not going to stop. The behavior is that it doesn't stop. And that's a problem of a part. But there are also behaviors that are a function of the system, like the beehive overall. So we try and go away. The other perspective that we're showing an alternative to is basically Western individualism. You know, we go look for, when good things happen, we look for heroes. When bad things happen, we look for villains or people who have harmed the system. Sometimes the system is itself the source of the behavior, which is a little bit abstract, but it's really, really important, because if we want to create permanent change, either in grant making or in the target of your various grants and grant making organizations, we have to approach the system. We can't just look at it as a set of parts. And finally, in this section, there's a great book. If you're interested in systems thinking, Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows is the Bible of this, the accessible Bible of systems thinking. And she identified 12 different ways to intervene in systems. We're obviously not going to go through all that here, but it is all the way from change the measures, change the numbers, do your KPIs, and those kinds of things, all the way up to overall goals and mindset. Obviously, easier at the bottom and harder at the top. It's a choice of where are we going to intervene in the system? Which of these strategies or set of strategies are we going to use that we believe give us the best benefit and change in the system with the least amount of cost and difficulty? If you can really change the KPIs and you're done, great. There's no sense in spending more time. Usually, however, tweaks generally don't do it. So that's one idea that I want to share with you, the systems thinking idea. Secondly, let's talk about change. We talk about change in three different attributes. In this case, the first attribute is extremely important, and that is that change comes from two places. It comes from the world to us, and we also influence the world. Inbound change is what it's basically sitting at the card table, getting your hand. It's being the home team on the football pitch. It's basically saying, okay, we got to play this team. We don't get a chance to choose. We have to play the hand. Oh, excuse me. We have to play the hand of 2022. But at the same time, grant making is all about outbound change. And so you're in the business of trying to influence the future with your work, but the future also influences your work. So these things are operating simultaneously, going one and the other. There's a huge distinction. It's always operating all the time, and we can keep working on that. Okay. Second attribute, where does change take place? Well, we begin with the enterprise, which could be your grant making organization. It could be any organization. It even could be an individual, as individuals involved in change. And enterprises exist in a transactional environment. They're daily, weekly, you know that environment. You're very familiar with it. And that's not anything that a foresight professional or futurist would get involved in. No, our environment is the global environment outside the transactional environment. We call it STEEP. There are other acronyms for it. And it basically takes society in general and divides it into sectors, because each one of these sectors is creating change, and that change comes to affect the transactional environment, which of course comes to affect the enterprise. And those sectors are interacting among themselves. They're not just influencing the transactional environment directly, they're also influencing. Is it possible to get a comprehensive, detailed look at this whole STEEP environment? Absolutely not. So one of our recommendations is back up and take a look at all of it once in a while. You may have a specialty. I mean, it may be health, maybe climate change, maybe education, but take a look at the whole system once in a while, because you will be able to get a sense, not complete knowledge, but a sense of what's going on. Pilots call this situational awareness. Soldiers and police officers are always looking around. They have a task at hand, but they always want to know what environment they're part of. So it's both. It's not either or, it's both and. We tend to divide the social into demographic and cultural. That's a little bit more technical aspects. Each of these sectors have subsectors, and it gets very complicated, but at the same time, we're just passing over it. In one sense, our recommendation is to come up with a holistic picture of where the world is, whether in general or within your targets or within your organization, and create a narrative, create an understanding of that. That's not analysis, because it's not taking things apart. It's actually synthesis, which is not something we learn so much in school. We learned about analysis, chemistry, and math, and even in literature. We don't really do so much synthesis. And so it's a little uncomfortable because there's no data associated with it, but it's something that we should be creating that narrative. The third attribute then is how fast change takes place. And this is a continuum, all the way from continuous change, which we're very familiar with. It's called trends. We can put them on a graph. We can extrapolate them using the models, climate change models, econometric models. All kinds of models are those, and people are very comfortable with that. What they forget, however, is what they learned in history. There have been trends in the past, and those trends have affected change, but there are also disruptions in the past. Not only also, if you look at your history book, it's 90% disruptions, wars, inventions, leaders, natural occurrences, natural disasters. All of those changed the world and created a world that's coming forward. It's not one or the other, but we forget that in the future, there will also be disruptions. We do not think about them because we're not allowed to think about them because we can't predict them. Oh, how do you know that's going to happen? I don't, but it could. And shouldn't we get in condition? Shouldn't we start thinking about alternatives and disruptions that could come along, both happy accidents and not so happy ones, but at least putting them into the narrative, not as predictions, but as practice of living in a different world, a world that we're not prepared for. Obviously, the extrapolation of trends is something we can do very, very easily, and we go forward. There are different kinds of people who deal with trends, and those are fundamentally what I would call managers. Managers are working within the system to improve it and create it more effectively. That's a wonderful purpose. There's no disparagement and no discounting at all. They create change. They create it rather slowly, and they tend not to challenge the system. We call leaders people who do challenge the system. People who say our fundamental assumptions may be wrong, not all of them and not everything, but we should be working in a way to reinvent the system, create a new system to some extent. So we say managers work in the system, and glad that they do, because we do want to become more effective and more efficient. But we also need leaders who work on the system, who say there is this possibility that we could reinvent ourselves and go forward. So the process, when a leader intentionally creates a disruption, and they do, it's not trends anymore. It's not just extrapolation. It's basically an event that occurs that starts a process of change. We use this S-curve as a model of that change. We use the concept of an era. We're in an era today. When that disruption occurs, we begin to leave that era and move into a transition period, which frankly, most people don't like, and therefore they're really kind of against it. They don't want it to happen. So when the leader says, let's, they say, no, thank you. And that's legitimate. They don't want to go through the transition. They don't want the problem of the chaos and making mistakes and spending money. Sooner or later, however, that transition period comes to an end and we arrive at the new era. And we'll talk about another model of that in just a moment. So when we go from one era to the other, however, again, it's not a smooth transition. We can't just leap from success to success. If we want to reinvent, if we want to be leaders, if we want transformation, we basically have to destroy things first. That sounds rather harsh, but you do. You have to destroy things first and then rebuild them from scratch. If you want a new kitchen, you got to take out the old kitchen. If you want a new accounting system, you got to give up the familiarity of what you knew. If you want a new grant making system, you have to back out of, respectfully, back out of things that have been true for a long time and move into that period as well. So this is an investment. Do people want to make an investment in each and every case? Of course not. You wouldn't invest your money in every person that came along and tried to sell you an annuity or a real estate deal. Of course not. We look at it as a cost benefit. I'm going to give up something. I'm going to tear that kitchen out. Am I going to get a better kitchen? And is it going to be worth the investment? Am I going to get a return? So that's, I think, the level of discussion that you could have with your colleagues in that. There is a wonderful video on this, which Hannah, I think, has shared with you before. It's about a system called Three Horizons. And I'm going to explain that in just a moment, but I learned a lot from that video. Three Horizons is essentially a model of change where it says that there are three kinds of changes going on simultaneously. The very first change is the first horizon, which is the present, which is the era. And sooner or later, it starts to go away. It gets old, it gets tired, it gets tattered, and we're kind of uncomfortable with it, but boy, we don't want to change. We want to stay with that old couch or that old car or whatever, but sooner or later, and as managers who are in that horizon, they're trying to keep the old system going, make it better even, not just preserve it, but even make it better. The third horizon is the visionary horizon. It's really people who are saying, yes, but. Okay, this has been fine. Thanks for the thoughts, but let's do something really important. Let's create something wonderful. And those are the visionaries in the group. And that visionary future is not real clear. It's vague, but it is appealing and it's attractive to some. The middle horizon, the second horizon, to me is the most interesting because these are the entrepreneurs. Whether you're in a business or you're in a grant making organization or in government or whatever, an entrepreneur is a person who says, you know, that first horizon is kind of going away. Is it time? Is there opportunity here? Because the obstacles to change are beginning to dissolve. I'm going to use that. I'm going to jump in here, create a new product, create a new service, create a new idea, because the whole thing is getting a little mushy. And now I have running room that I didn't have before. So these three horizons are three different kinds of people. I used to think about it that way. After watching that video, and I really urge you to watch the video if you haven't already, I realized there's another way of thinking about this. And these are three different discussions possible to have. Because is the change going to be incremental? Are we just going to kind of efficiency our way and effective our way into the future and do that well? Or is it going to be transformational? And to me, it's both, depending on the case by case. This is not science. This is discussion. This is how much incremental do we want and how much transformational do we want? And these are questions that I think come out of the Three Horizons framework that I think are very valuable for creating change. First of all, we have to take stock. Maybe the current era, the current system is not so bad after all. What's the evidence that it's under? Everybody assumes, oh, it's under stress. The video assumes, well, it's under stress. It's going to go away anytime soon. Well, some systems will and some won't. So it's our decision and our discussion to have. What's the promise of the visionary system? Is there really something out there that's better? Is it all as utopian as people, as the visionaries tell us? Probably not. Are there unintended consequences? Probably yes. So we need to take stock of that visionary future. And then finally, the second horizon. Where are the windows of opportunity for innovation? Not just changing the whole system, but what can we do now to say, let's move this one this way, move this one this way. And obviously, because we're making an investment in the future, what are the costs and benefits of all of that? So it is not whether we should change, it is when we should change, how much and how fast. That to me is a discussion, moving people off the sides of the extreme, hell no, I won't go, to we got to blow it up and start all over again. Getting them into the center of the discussion using these kind of questions, I think, would be valuable for participatory grant making or any other kind of innovative change that you would like for your organizations. Nothing changes everything. Values, vision, mission generally stay the same. You have a wonderful mission and the values and the vision to bring it about. It's how we approach those. That's what changes. And some people think it's all in the rock. No, we're going to change the top levels of that and go forward. So we're Teach the Future. We're interested in bringing this kind of thinking to young people. We get a lot of agreement within the educational sphere. Still not so much action, but maybe the train is beginning to move. It's been a pleasure sharing this with you. And I certainly hope to hear your questions and hear the comments from the other panelists. So Hannah, back to you.
Thank you so much, Peter. I find this whole space really interesting and slightly overwhelming. So it's really nice to kind of have different people explain different models in different ways. I kind of feel a lot with the Horizons framework that participatory grant making is almost the second horizon. So it's a little bit of innovation, but ultimately all it's doing is changing an aspect of traditional funding in a slightly different way. And actually there could be something bigger and better coming on the kind of like into the future. And what does that look like? Is participatory grant making just a stepping stone for that? I kind of hope so, because if this is as good as it gets, I think there's probably a bit of a problem. I think we should all be striving for bigger and better. And we've got some excellent speakers now to talk about the different ways that, so there's two parts of this that get a bit confusing, is around how participatory grant making can help you fund projects that are working in these ways, that are future focused, that are using foresight practice. And there's also an element where foresight practice can inform the way that we do participatory grant making. So those are the kind of things that we'll be unpicking as we hear from our speakers. Really interested to hear challenge or differing opinions or different ways of working or new models. So I'm excited to have some of that chat. Okay, so first up we've got Sanana, who I think is around. Hello. Do you want to give us a little rundown about your thoughts, opinions, ideas, how you've been using this in your work to date?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Hannah. Hey, everybody. My name is Sunana, and the first thing that I want to do before we start off is ask y'all a question, which is, this is not a pen. What is it?
Is it a torch?
It's a torch. I can light it. Okay, it's a torch. It could be a torch. What else could it be? I think it could be like a seesaw, maybe, if I balance it like this. What else could it be? A tiny baseball bat? Boom! Oh, it could definitely be a hair curler. I think that's true. I can curl my hair with it. That might actually be something we could do. What else? A drink stir coming into the chat. Yes, I can definitely do that. What else is it? It's not a pen. It's a mustache for sure. A straw for sure. What else you got? Come on. We can. So we're gonna hold. Oh, a magic wand. So I'm gonna hold a door open. Very good. Mascara. It actually really does look like my mascara. That's true. A lightning bolt. Well, Vern, I'm curious about that one. Let's get 3 more. If you want to come off mute, if you want to go on the chat, that's fine. Lantern. Oh, I love it. Okay. A necklace charm. Yes, that it could definitely be. Why did I start like this? Does anybody have a thought? Hannah, do you have a thought?
Getting us to use our imagination.
That's true. Why is imagination important to futures thinking?
Because you have to imagine something in order to get to it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. That's right.
Somebody else should chip in, because otherwise this is a lot of pressure on me and awkward. So do feel free to unmute and get involved.
Yeah. Anybody else? What do you think? Irene, see things differently. Totally. Y'all, you're removing barriers. Kate, if you have any, interest in coming off mute, I would love to hear what you mean by that.
Hi, yeah, I've listened to some future forecasting sort of podcasts recently, and it was all about imagine what the future looks like without placing those barriers in front of you. So what does it feel like? What does it appear like? What does it taste like? How do you operate in it? So it was just, don't hit the barriers, just be whatever you want to be.
Kate, that is exactly, all of these things are exactly right. I think that one is super important, because a lot of people will look at this and say, I don't know. It can't be a lantern. It can't be a magic wand. It can't be a this. It can't be a lightning bolt. It can't be a this or that. And so much of our grant making practice has said, well, you can't involve community members. You can't do this. You can't pay them. You can't so much of what we are doing with participatory grant making is imagining a future that does not yet exist, right? It's forcing not only ourselves, but other people to say, no, this is not a pen. Like, even though we've been doing this grant making practice for so long, we have to imagine other bolder possibilities. Even if, when we actually do participatory grant making, a lot of folks will say, well, but we can't involve in strategy, but we can't actually embed in our organization, but we can't, there are all these barriers that suddenly you start to have. But why can't this pen be a lantern? Why can't it be a hair curler? Why can't it be anything else? And so I think such a fundamental part of futures thinking is having the audacity to dream into new futures, and having that not be a frivolous act, but actually an act of radical transformation. So often we hear, folks, especially who are in Horizon 1 or 2, for instance, will say we just got to do the basics. We just got to do the basics. You hear this for young people a lot too, right? Young people just got to learn the basics. And that always feels so sad to me. I think about Janine Gomez over at I Dream PCS, which is a charter school over in DC. And she's like, Black and brown young folks should be able to dream. Everyone should be able to dream. Dreaming is a fundamental right. And dreaming is such a huge part of futures thinking. And so what I want to do for the next 10 minutes or so is, yes, tell you about our practice at the Reinvention Lab around futures thinking and how that's related to participatory grant making. But I want to do that through centering in 3 quotes by 3 Black women who are incredible futures thinkers, and who you all should know about if you don't know about already in the realm of futures thinking. So the first, and I'm just going to share my screen just briefly as I share each one of these quotes, and then I'll take it back off. But the first one is from Octavia Butler. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. And I want to share this quote because I think sometimes people think that futures thinking is this lofty thing that only a few people can do, or that you have to go to University of Houston and be like a futurist. And there are actually tools and strategies that anyone can use that are pretty easy. I mean, even the one I just did, right? This is not a pen, is a way for us to really easy and quickly get in the mindset of thinking about new possibilities when we're imagining futures. And there's actually various courses. I mean, KnowledgeWorks does a great job of training educators and has a bunch of courses around futures thinking for educators and other people in the world. If you're interested in that, the University of Houston has public futures thinking workshops that folks can go to. The D School at Stanford is doing a lot of work in this. So there are a lot of places you can go to hone your craft. But what I want to say is, like, every single one of you is a futures thinker because you're constantly involved in change. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. And the only lasting truth is change. We are all in a time of great and deep change. And so I want you to feel like navigating ambiguity and this work of systems, especially if you're doing participatory decision-making, you are a futures thinker. And there are many ways in which you can then hone your craft of becoming an even deeper futures thinker in the work that you do. When we do participatory grant making, every single iteration, we change a variable, an aspect of it. We try to experiment with something. So one time this last time we totally removed the application entirely and said, well, what if we did this without an application, and had kind of a learning posture of saying, like, let's imagine a world without applications. What would that look like? And how do we do a small step into getting to that place? And so the second person that I want to talk about is it says Bill Hooks. Thank you, autocorrect. Bell Hooks. I will change that in the slide. But what she says is a good definition marks our starting point and lets us know where we want to end up. As we move towards our desired destination, we chart the journey, creating a map. And so someone who, when I was talking about the pen example, said, like, we need to know where we're going, like something about kind of like knowing where we are and where we're trying to go. Hannah, I think you said this, like, if we imagine, if we dream, if imagination is a part of futures thinking, it's because we need to know where the end destination is in order to get there. And so I think often, again, to the barriers point, folks often will stop by saying, well, I don't really know why this matters or why it's possible. Or I don't have a view for the future. And without that kind of visioning exercise, it's really hard to get there. And so for me, I work at Teach for America at something called the Reinvention Lab, where our task is to do things that are kind of new and novel. But even then, sometimes when I was doing participatory grant making, I was like, we're not a funder. Like, why are we doing this? Like, I know in my heart this is right. And I can imagine a world in which, democracy is not just about voting, but it's about full co-creation and participation among all people in a society, right? I can imagine that world, and I want to create that world in a small way in what I'm doing, but I don't know where the application is exactly yet, beyond funding. And now that I've charted that course and started on that course, now at this point, we just started a couple of small pilots in 2 regions where we're experimenting with bringing young folks, community members, faith leaders, parents, into selecting Teach for America core members. So having community members select the teachers that enter their community. And so because I was able to dream into that future, get to kind of the next point that was near me in the lab, now I'm really able to say, like, okay, what are the systems change implementations that we can do here? And so I think it's really important to set that kind of dreaming north point and then be able to kind of scale back from that, but also be able to kind of keep that vision front and center. And I think that for me is what futures thinking is beautiful in doing. Another point I want to make to this group is that futures thinking doesn't happen alone. So I'm going to drop in the chat a publication that we did recently called Dreaming into Learning Futures, which was co-created by a bunch of people on Twitter Spaces, actually. And we worked with the futurists at KnowledgeWorks on it, where we thought about, like, what is the future of education and 10 years from now, and how do we dream into that future? And so what this document will give you is a lot of kind of visioning points kind of farther out in time to be able to see, okay, if this is where we want the stage of education to be, how do we get there? But also we'll show you kind of a lot of tools, what if questioning, stuff like that you can use in your own futures work. Okay, and the very last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a last quote, a last Black woman, a last resource for you as we leave, as I drop off and hand the mic to the next person, which is Adrienne Maree Brown, who some of you might know. She says, the patterns of the universe repeat at scale. There's a structural echo that suggests two things. One, that there are shapes and patterns fundamental to our universe. And two, that what we practice at the small scale can reverberate at the larger scale. If you are thinking about doing futures work and you have not read Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Maree Brown, it is a must read. You must pick it up. You must use it. Our entire theory of change at the Reinvention Lab is based on Emergent Strategy, and our entire work in participatory grant making has been based in Emergent Strategy. And what I want to say here is two things. One, start small. Like, you can dream big and chart that course, but there are ways in which I can also talk later about how small we started, because the change that happens at the small scale reverberates at the largest scale. And what does that look like in institutions and with participatory grant making as well? And that's also key to futures work. It can feel so large because you're looking 10, 15, 20, sometimes 100 years into the future. And it can feel almost like abstract. And so to pull it back to the small things that you can do to create change towards that future is so important. And the second thing I'll say is this, like, natural proliferation is really important. So I actually don't think I agree with Peter that all the time you have to destroy things in order to create new. He used the example of the kitchen. I'd use the example of composting. In the natural world, when things die, when they decompose, they actually create new things in the earth. And so oftentimes what I see is people really trying to destroy all of their current grant making practices in order to create new. And there's still some good that we can find in the composting of things that need to not entirely go away, right, but can feed the next version of something. And so I think as we think about futures thinking, it's also connected to design and iterative design. And how do we figure out how to reconstruct systems in a way that compost? How do we reconstruct systems in a way where we think about abundance rather than scarcity? And how do we think about recreating and reinventing systems in a way that's natural versus industrial? And so those are what I'll leave you with as I pass the mic.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Angela. Do you want to come and join us on stage? I don't know if that's a thing, but yeah, come and get involved. Let us know about the work that Emergent Fund are doing, your thoughts on what's been said so far.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also, I want to make sure I get your name right. Thanks for passing me the mic, but could you just say it? Also, just give it up for the ancestors. We want to make sure you get your name right here in this space.
Yes, thank you. Sunana.
Sunana, yeah, thanks for passing the mic. I really love that you brought in movement ancestors, sort of like the Black queer feminist trifecta. You brought in Octavia Butler, Bell Hooks, and Adrienne Maree Brown, who's actually one of the early shapers of Emergent Fund. So I'm really grateful that you brought them into the room. You really teed it up. I'm Angela Vo. I am a senior program officer at Emergent Fund, but we are a team of two, so you have half of Emergent Fund here. But the work is more than just the two of us, and so I'll share a little bit about that. I think before you get to learn a little bit about our work and about who I am, I want to learn more about you. I was really struck by, Octavia Butler's, all you touch, you change, all that you change changes you. I really wanted to hear from folks, because I think a lot as we're in this work of building institutions and systems and ways of thinking that affirm our lives and our aliveness. I wanted to hear about, and if folks could just drop in the chat, a time where you felt really alive when it came to social change, or when you felt alive, brought alive by something such as taking part larger than yourself. So what's a last moment where you personally felt, and no right or wrong answer, this is just about speaking to you and what's calling to you. What's a moment where you last felt really alive, brought alive by a lot of the exciting things that's happening right now in this moment? And can y'all drop that in the chat? And I'm just going to reframe it and put it in the chat too for folks who are visual learners. Thanks for sharing a little bit of yourselves with me. So what's a movable moment or spark that personally spoke to you that made you feel alive? I also used to be a teacher, so I'm going to count to 20. Give folks time to reflect. What's a movable time? Something that brought you alive when it came to social change work. Yeah, thank you. Also, let me know if I'm getting this correct. Morvern. bringing folks together in a room to share their experiences and work. Yeah. You know, sometimes like the bad moments remind you also of the importance of feeling alive. So I hear that too. This is hard. I know. I started out with a tricky question. Reclaim the night. I love it. I see a dance party in here. Um, Brought to the streets outside the building, variety of world dance style, sharing community through dance and movement. Being with friends all over the world. Deliberative democracy lab felt energy. I'm noticing a theme being in community with folks. I think that's been really energizing, what brings us alive. The meetup in London, beautiful. I also I see some folks DMing me, and I appreciate that too. I won't share it loud, but I just want to say that I'm witnessing you. Yeah, marginalized artists coming together to do a funding. Y'all are making me feel alive. Thank you so much. The reason why I wanted to start there is the personal is political, and we're always trying to move towards a world of abundance and yes, right? So, what to build life affirming institutions, like what is bringing us alive, and connecting with that sense also helps us like lead with that feeling like into our work. I also want to name that like whenever we're talking about frameworks are really important. And I can share a little bit more about the frameworks that shape our world. But I also want to name that we have access to the tools that we need. We are enough. We are worthy. And so I just want to lead with that. I don't know if I can get a resounding like we are enough. I just want to affirm our agency to also be agents of social change. Like we are enough. We have the tools. You know, we can learn from frameworks, but also we should never only look outside of ourselves and outside of our own communities for the answers. So I just wanted to ground us there. I can share. I feel like there's a lot. This is quite a loaded. We're like touching on like systems change, talking about the future, which is like huge. It can feel overwhelming. I'm gonna step back and maybe ground us in sharing a little bit about our work, and then after I share up front about our work and sort of our design and the thinking, more so about ways of thinking that shape our work, and less about like a prescriptive like here's how you do future forward thinking participatory grant making. So yeah, I'm with Emergent Fund, and I can drop the chat. I'm actually, instead of sharing like our like an annual report or anything like that, I'm going to start with what's most important, which is like our people. We are a collective. We're a team of two queer Black and brown women. Both Alicia and I come from organizing. We also both are daughters of immigrants and refugees, and that's like part of our ancestors that we bring into the work. And we also have a whole body of organizers, activists, and movement thought leaders who shape our work. And, you know, the work of social change takes many hands. So I do want to bring them into the space with us, and they're absolutely brilliant. I could take time to go through how each and every one of them, but, you know, you can see that for yourself in the link. So I think like our core theory of change is that we understand that movements have long relied on creative collective responses. A lot of you found power and a sense of aliveness from being in community. All that we do is community, right? And so we believe that movements have long relied on communities coming together who are creatively responding to crises, and they're transforming crisis into emergent strategic opportunities to organize and build new realities and new worlds. It's both very simple and very hard. As part of this work, we fund explicitly rapid response and emergent organizing that's all led by frontline Black, Indigenous organizers of color. We do trust-based, no strings attached grants, and we're one of the few grant makers who do this type of work and who operate on the scale that we do. We support the work of communities under threat to build their own new reality, and we believe in building worlds that are going to emerge on the other side of crisis, to break cycles of oppression, and really following and centering the leadership and powerful new vision from communities who are frontline, who are directly impacted to shape the solutions for the world that they need, so that we don't have to keep doing this. 100%, we are really different and unique as a fund in that we fund in terms of who we fund, but then also like how we fund. And so I really want to name that part of our process is that we rely very heavily on a majority queer, women-led, 100% people of color advisory council of really beautiful organizers who have deep roots in community to shape our work. And we all come from directly impacted communities ourselves. Um, yeah, we serve a very unique and specific lane in the movement rapid response funding ecosystem. We also use a portal called Just Fund, and I highly recommend for funders who are in here to check it out, or if you yourself are an organizer, shout out if there are any organizers in the room to also check it out, because I think one thing that we think about process is minimizing the burden on organizers who are leading change at the helms of these front lines and at the heart of crisis. And then we're also asking them to do like burdensome reports and applications. Part of our process is that we're going to be as minimal as possible, really leaning into trust in our networks to strategically drive dollars to where they're most needed. And we have a one-touch 10-minute process that really gets us the bare bone financial information that we can send money direct to the front lines. And for anyone who applies, they also are seen and viewed by 5,000 plus values aligned funders who could also with one touch fund them immediately. So we're trying to like save organizers time and not have them fight for crumbs from philanthropy when their time could be better spent with their people, healing, and really leading the hard, under-resourced work of social change work. So that was us in a nutshell. I want to take a breath. I wanted to sort of move back, big picture. And I think that the way how we think about emergent strategy is we were really designed to meet the timing and to respond to the time of organizers on the front line who are also constantly responding to the world. I think really strategically, organizers are always paying attention to the moment and how they can leverage moments into long-lasting social change. And so in some sense, I think sometimes people think about rapid response organizing as sort of a bandage solution, but really like when organizers are really strategic with their campaign and you have the public imagination captured over a certain event. I think of one that got a lot of really interesting and like really a lot of visibility is, does anyone follow the tomato soup and the Van Gogh piece? Yeah, it sparked some really powerful conversations about youth-led climate justice work, right? And the level of strategy, people are sleeping on young people, but these young people knew what they were doing. And it generated an enormous buzz, right? Which was directing attention exactly to where it needed to be. And I liked how they were calling in institutions and also adults, right? To be accountable for their participation and not creating a world that is sustainable for their future. So in many ways, like Emergent Fund, our form fits function. We're designed to be as nimble as possible to mobilize resources to the front lines. We are one of the few open funds. So in addition to folks who find us just through word of mouth, anyone can apply to us. But also we fund folks based through word of mouth through our own networks. And so folks will be like, as the water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi, where decades of divestment, which is a familiar story, is coming to a head, who's on the ground. And so, in real time, like the day the news breaks, we're able to move money and our grants can be in hand within the week. And we're trust-based, we're unrestricted, we're not conditions. And part of that also is like how we think about shifting power and philanthropy. And so I wanted to bring this in because a framework that's shaping us. There are really two for me that really resonate. I'm sure there's much more that shapes this work, but our core work and framework is about shifting power. And whenever we're talking about power, it's grounded by a long legacy of like freedom movements, decolonial struggle, collective liberation work, all led by Black and Brown people. The ancestors of our work are Black feminists, like the three who are named earlier here: Octavia Butler, Bell Hooks, Adrienne Marie Brown, Indigenous folks, and the global majority of people of color, and our grandmothers who are sitting around the kitchen table who have been powerful in their own right. I think about the differences between my refugee Viet grandmother and the life that I currently have. So we think about money as a tool to shift power back into the hands of people of color. We see our work as reparations. And I want to name that because it's not our money. We are not in the business of philanthropy. We don't see resource organizing work as a matter of investment. We don't use terms like we're in business. It's not an entrepreneur. We're not social entrepreneurs. It's not our money. We're not here to invest it. None of it is. All wealth is built on stolen land, lives, and labor through extraction and exploitation. The way how Alicia and I and all of the organizers who have hands in our work, we really see this as our money. There's our money that's been stolen from us. It's been built on our backs, and we are bringing it home. And so we practice resource organizing in this like really fraught space of philanthropy as a matter of justice and not as a matter of strategic investments and I'm trying to get the best return on my money. It's not our money. I think two is also like the master's tool will never dismantle the master's house, which is Audre Lorde, another ancestor brought into the space. We don't look to current systems of oppression to save us from them. This is, white supremacy, capitalism, colonialism, patriarchy. And I think part of being strategic in the work of philanthropy is where a lot of our money lives, and taking it back. And we have to like really navigate the contradictions there. And I think what keeps us grounded is community, what makes us come alive. And so I think part of our accountability and why our work is grounded in relationships is because that's also what keeps us accountable to the front lines. There's a lot. I feel like there's so much I wanted to say, but I'm also going to create space for y'all to shape the conversation and to answer any questions. I just got the time thing. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop. Pass the mic back to Anna. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Oh, it's so exciting. It's so much, so much to think about. I'm going to bring in our last speaker, Leah, who is just about to set up an Emergent fund. So some really interesting thoughts and challenges, and I'm sure your brain is absolutely whizzing. I've been watching you scribble down notes, Leah. So do you want to come in and say what your thoughts are, feelings are, how you're finding things?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, my brain cogs are whirring completely and I've got loads of notes, so yeah, this is all very exciting. Thank you. I'm going to share, I've got a few slides I'm going to share. That's the right one. Hang on, let me just get the right one. Okay, good. Right, yes, I'm very excited to be here. So my name's Leah. I've been working in and around the social sector, charities, funding, arts and creative industries for the last 20 years. I've worked in funding and I've most recently been running a building-based community arts organisation in Edinburgh. So what do I know about participatory grant making and long-term thinking? Well, I've had major imposter syndrome, which I told everybody when I found out who else was speaking here. But then the more I thought about it, I thought actually, the work I'm doing doesn't exist yet, which I suppose is futures work in itself. And all of the experiences I've had have shaped the thinking. So I've been working at Whale Arts. Whale Arts is a community-based arts organisation in southwest Edinburgh, an area called Wester Hales. It's hyper-local, community-led, local decision-making, local board. Everything we do is based on trust between board, staff, volunteers, participants and local people. And trust is that kind of golden thread, and that's come up a few times tonight as well. In Edinburgh, we have a couple of pieces of work that have been going on the last few years. So Poverty Commission and Climate Commission, both with goals, big goals, so end poverty and net zero by 2030. And I was reading this last year and thinking, how the hell do we do this with short-term funding? Community organisations are so well placed to do this, but it seems really impossible as we aren't able to act or think or act longer term. I started blogging, I started writing, putting ideas out into the world, and off the back of that, I had some really brilliant conversations. So what I'm working on is called Regenerative Futures Fund. There are some principles which have come up at various times this evening as well. So thinking about unrestricted funding, long-term, new money, participatory decision-making, and then this golden thread running through everything, which is trust. So this is what my next year looks like. So I'm at the very beginning stage at the moment. I'm seconded into an organisation called EVOC, which is Edinburgh Voluntary Organisation Council, so like a network body for voluntary sector, third sector in Edinburgh. And the kind of idea is that there are some different areas that I'm going to be working on. I think the most relevant one for this evening is this idea of learning and designing together. So shifting power, collective intelligence, looking at raising money, thinking about working in the open and how that might help us to move things forward and amplifying voices, what the governance legal structure looks like, and then systemic change, which is so interested to hear others' thoughts on systemic change. So the idea is that we launch a new fund next year, which is a 10-year unrestricted fund working towards these big aims, so end poverty and net zero, and then thinking about how we might support individuals and working in partnership with an organisation called Turn to Us, who do grants to individuals, and what that might look like combined. So there's a lot of words on this slide, and it's like bad practice to put lots of words in the slide, so I don't expect everyone to read it all, but it was just to show the kind of process of collective intelligence and shifting power. So we have a funders community of practice, we've got End Poverty and members groups, so they're people with lived experience of poverty, an existing group, and Mary Reid, who I think is actually on the call, actually is one of the facilitators that we're going to be working with. Who has lots of experience of working with care experienced young people actually in participatory decision making, and then thinking about how we work with organisations, and then I think this is the most important bit, is how we bring these people together. So with the guides and facilitators, so Mary, Susie, Shasta, Tala and Patrizia, and yeah, beginning to think about how we can design this with that sort of real lovely rich collective intelligence approach. So yes, we have words here that I think we see a lot, and I think funders use a lot. So long-term transformation, innovation, and futures. And I think sometimes I'm interested in the Three Horizons model, because I think sometimes these things are kind of overlooked. So short-term core services, day-to-day things, tried and tested, boring in inverted commas, and I think this is a kind of ongoing issue around how do you that we need the foundational things in that Three Horizons model, that first horizon that kind of goes down. There's parts of the status quo and core services that we can't lose, and without which we'd see our systems fall apart. I have a nice example of this when I've been talking to organisations about long-term funding in Edinburgh, a guy called Peter who runs community buses, and he said, Leah, community buses are not sexy, they're not transformational, they're not innovative, but we need them to get people from their homes to the places where that transformational work will happen. So by that existing, they enable the transformational work to happen. So I suppose it's just that idea of if we fund the day-to-day sort of boring stuff over the long term, might that result in transformation? And I suppose this is where the Three Horizons model sort of really makes sense to me in relation to unrestricted long-term funding and participatory grant making. So I suppose there's a universal acknowledgement that we need to do things differently, and long-term transformational change requires us to have that strong foundation of vital services, but also requires us to have this vision for a better future and a belief that aspects of how we do things now are obsolete and are sort of part of the problem. And within that, we need diverse visions and experiments to happen. So I suppose within that middle, that blue one, the Horizon 2, to allow to move that collective conversation forward in a really inclusive and participatory way. I was just going to show this as well with my colleague Patrizia, who is involved with the Edinburgh Trust. They do grants to individuals. We were thinking about this thing around sort of surviving to thriving. So you have organisations that are supporting individuals and communities that are really, really struggling. And I think, Angela, you just said something really lovely there about not fighting for crumbs. And I think that's what's happening, is organisations that are there really well placed to support people are just really struggling because everything is short term, and yeah, they're fighting for crumbs. So this idea, I mean, this is an absolute scribble, and the colour's probably quite bad. You might be able to see it very well, but essentially it's that, you know, in the middle, people are surviving, organisations and individuals, and we have a status quo, short-term funding and short-term thinking. If we had longer-term funding that was unrestricted, is that going to allow us to do more longer-term thinking? And then might we then have organisations and individuals thriving? And I was thinking about this when I was preparing, and I thought, if this was a cake and you cut it like in the middle, I think what would be in the middle would be trust. You know, like one of those rainbow cakes, but it would be trust right in the middle of that cake. And then yeah, just sort of coming towards the end. So I suppose thinking about continuous learning. So I suppose with this, the foundation that we're trying to build is that we're designing a new fund in a really genuinely participatory way, thinking about things like how people apply. Sunana, you mentioned about, just taking the application forms away. So thinking about all of that stuff, do you work across the whole city? Is it just in one locality in Edinburgh? All of those things, but doing that together in that collective intelligence way. But also thinking about over 10 years, how do we build in respectful continuous learning that factors in accountability and builds trust that flows both ways, and coaching. And I noticed Morven's on the call as well, who's also thinking about coaching in a kind of funding context. I did a coaching course last year, and I think that beautiful thing with coaching about how the ideas, the solutions to your problems are within you, and actually thinking about that is a really respectful way of getting people to imagine and think long term and work towards big goals, and maybe building that into some of the processes as well, and obviously trust at the heart of absolutely everything. And just finally, just wanted to, I suppose, talk a little bit about systemic change. So through taking an action and trying something new, designing and learning together and building respectful learning in the long term, and sharing what we're working on kind of as we go, might this contribute to systemic change? So I suppose this is like the taking little action bit and then trying to inform a wider change. And I just wanted to also say, yeah, that I suppose if this works in Edinburgh, some of the conversations we've been having are just around, if it works in Edinburgh, we get the principles right, could it work elsewhere? That's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really exciting to hear more about where your work is going and your kind of struggles, tribulations, challenges, excitement across all the speakers. We've got time now for some questions. If anybody has anything that they would like to ask or comment or add in, please do feel free to add them into the chat. There has been one question, Leah, which is probably maybe slightly easy to answer, but can you repeat who the person is that you mentioned who has experience working with young people? Somebody who's keen to connect with people that have been involved in participatory evaluations of programmes. And actually participation in evaluation has come up a couple of times, and there might be a possibility that we do a session on that at some point. But so if anybody knows of anybody that would be interested as a speaker for that, please do let us know and we can connect. Okay. Somebody has asked, Casey, is that how you pronounce your name? Just want to check I've got that right. Yeah. No.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks.
Amazing. Do you want to say your question, Casey?
Yeah, Angela, thank you so much for your presentation. You mentioned some sort of simplified grant process that you guys utilize, and I'd be very curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to bring in, so Just One is a relatively new tech innovation platform, but I just want to bring in the brilliance of Yara Pang, who was part of also the conversations leading up to Emergent Fund. Emergent Fund was founded by Women of Color Donor Network, Donors of Color Network, Democracy Alliance, etc. She was in that space. And then has innovated here. It's a really great platform. They vet every single funder who participates, and so they're all movement aligned. They're by now 5,000 plus, including some high network individuals who are in the room, but they're all like share a value of like collective liberation and commitment to accountability to communities of color. It's like quicker than signing up for an app is our proposal. So some of our grantees, like when in Chicago, when there were youth-led uprisings in response to the police murder of Adam Toledo, we had folks who were, texting and filling out the application while sitting on the floor of jail support, and then also able to mobilize their comrades who are also sitting on the floor. And they, we were able to move like 50K like to the ground plus. So yeah, highly recommend you check it out. Amazing platform. And they also scale it for participation. We're a smaller funder, and so their whole model is about minimal cost for organizings, and really they see themselves as part of movement infrastructure. So it's scaled depending on also how large your fund is. And free for all organizers. So if you have grantees that you'd like to, who you think would be aligned, yeah, that would be great too.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, really interesting. Any other questions at all? Yeah, lots of love for Just Fund in the chat, which is exciting. Yeah, lots and lots of love for Just Fund. So definitely want to stick on the list to check out. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Sunana, I don't know if you've got anything, having heard the other speakers, or Angela or Peter, that you want to kind of respond to or lift up or disagree with?
Just put most of, I mean, particularly Angela and Sunana's context, beautiful examples of visionary futures, the visionary horizon on the 3 horizons, and Leah, a little bit more entrepreneurial. Good luck to you.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. And I think so much of this work, it sometimes can get separated out as like, this is participatory gut making and this is futures work. And it's quite nice to be bringing some of those together and kind of merging and like working at spaces where both can feed into each other, and it gets a bit messy, but I think participatory gut making, if it's not messy, you're probably doing it wrong. So that's a nice way of kind of, yeah, melding those 2 practices and thinking about the different framings and narratives and lenses that you can bring to the work. Anybody else want to add in anything at this point in time? Everybody has gone deathly quiet. This might be because the UK are at 5 p.m, so everybody's like, oh, it's home time now. The rest of you, I think, are kind of at different points in your days. I'm not going to push this if people are ready and done, but I just want to make sure that we're not kind of missing people's opportunities to add into the conversation and share kind of thoughts or wisdom.
Hi, I'm Amara. I don't have anything to ask, but I really liked what Sunana mentioned and Angela. So like really appreciate the work you guys doing and the support, and really like the way you were transparent and honest about what you spoke about, and it was really relatable. So thank you so much for that. Thank you very much.
Well, I couldn't echo the thanks enough. It's been so lovely kind of like putting this session together and chatting to Peter and Leah and Angela and Sunana about kind of like what this could look like. I think it's been a bit of a balancing act, because we have kind of like a lot of people that are embedded in this ways of working and others that are kind of, it's totally new. So trying to balance, how do you bring the kind of 101 and what that looks like into actually how you can move through this practice being embedded in everything. So I just want to say a huge thank you to you 4 and all of the work that you've put in kind of before to get to this point, not just for preparing for the session, but just generally in the work that you've kind of been living and breathing through your careers. It's much appreciated, and we all benefit from that wisdom and learning. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah. It's wonderful being with you all. Good luck to you. You're doing great.
Thank you, Hannah, for organizing this really and getting the speakers together. It was really nice.
It's such a privilege. I get to chat to these amazing people. It's
yes,
great.
really, like it's so good to see young people. Like I've always seen like, okay, philanthropy was only after you're done with your career, and I'm myself 28. Yeah, and I'm myself 28, and I see myself growing into this field, having my own social enterprise, working towards it. So I'm so intrigued and so inspired by the people you got alike and the way they spoke. So thank you so much. And thank you everybody for speaking.
Amazing. And if there's any ways that the Participatory Grantmaking community can help any of you on your journey in philanthropy to shift power to communities, to think about doing things differently and kind of like ensuring resources are in the hands of the communities that created those resources, we are down to help in whatever way. Have a lovely rest of the day, everybody, whatever time it is. Enjoy, and I hope you have a nice evening or day. Times are weird.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Hannah.
Thank
just
you so
one
much.
last thing. How do I join the Slack channel?
Yes, of course. I'll put the stuff in the chat so that you can see it.
Okay,
Hang on
great.
1 second. But everything is on our website. So if you go to our website, there's a bit at the bottom. This is where Elena is normally amazing, and she's dipped off for another call because
Okay.
she's always so on top of it, and she's got the links ready, and I'm a bit slower.
Yeah.
So here is our website. You can join. So if you scroll down, there's a join the community page there,
Yeah.
and that will help you link up. And then at the top, there's all of our events and our listings, as well as resources, general kind of advice and guidance in the way that we support and do stuff.
Great. Thanks. Thank you so
No
much.
worries. See you later, everybody.
Thank
See
you
you.
so much,
Bye-bye.
Hannah. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you soon.